All right. So season 3 is over with, and now everybody's talking about how they felt about it and how you thought season 3 went. Did you think it was a great season? Did you think there were some issues with it? I thought it was an amazing season overall and really, really, really well done. And I'm super excited for season 4, everything that could be a part of that. But Dallas Jenkins and Jonathan Rumi actually sat down and had a similar conversation talking about how this show has impacted them and how season 3 kind of went for them, all from the feeding of the 5,000 to the walking on water and everything in between. So let's check out this interview. It's a long one, so chill with me for a little bit. I may break this video up into parts, so depending on that, stick with me and hang out with me to watch this video. Here we go.
C mark. D mark.
Cameras, let me know when you're set.
D frame.
A frame. All right. Whenever you're ready, Dallas.
Do you ever sit here as we face off? We meet again, Jonathan.
Alas, we meet again, Mr. Jenkins.
Yes. Do you ever have moments of remembering back when we were in a rock quarry in Illinois? First time I met you was in Chicago because I cast you as Jesus in that little short film.
So this is a short film called The Two Thieves, is the name for it now. This is the first time that Jonathan played Jesus, and it's on the cross. I actually made a video about this a while ago, maybe a year ago. And it's a pretty good short film. Like, it's really interesting. Dallas made it for Easter, I think, for his church. And I think they did a great job on this. If you haven't checked it out, you can check it out. I think it's still on YouTube and stuff if you want to go check it out there, or you can rent it from somewhere online. There's different places where you can see it, but it's not really about Jonathan. He only appears on the cross at the end of the short film. But there are some other stuff that kind of goes on there. It's actually a pretty cool short film altogether.
And then we were in a rock quarry in Illinois in frigid weather while you were up on the cross wearing a loincloth. Quite a lot has happened since then. One thing that hasn't changed is your physical discomfort whenever you're on camera for me, because I'm usually putting you in either extreme hot or extreme cold. So that hasn't changed.
Yes, I have you to thank for that.
Yes.
In fact, every time there's cold weather at all, I'm brought back immediately to the cross in a rock quarry.
Yeah, not in a good way.
Lots of suffering.
Do you ever think back to what it was, at this point now, it was like 8 years ago, 9 years ago, to where we are now?
It's pretty extraordinary. I remember I wore a wig in that shoot. My hair wasn't long enough, so I was outfitted with a wig.
Yeah, you could definitely tell that's a wig for sure.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. So I remember trying to fit the wig. I'm like, yeah, I think this works. Because I just started growing my hair out. So now to actually have it long enough where I don't need that anymore, that's one of the things that kind of sticks out for me.
Yeah, it does keep on getting longer and longer throughout the seasons. One video that I want to do as well is talking about how the characters have changed since season 1, because they have changed so much.
And then all the different flats and set pieces that were pulled from the studio where we were filming.
It's just so innocent when you think back on it. And you and I started talking through the character. How far do we go here? And what's he thinking here? And exploring those emotions. And I think all of that was this training ground for what was to come. Not much has changed from what we were discovering. This notion of, we're going to play this. Yeah. Jesus is going to be a human being. We know he's fully God, fully man, but you can't play the God part. No. Other than in the actions of the miracles.
In the short film's case, the forgiveness of the thief on the cross, the compassion, the authority. Having this conversation with this thief on the cross was not something I'd ever thought about before. And then when we came back a year later, and then we were working on the apostles' arm wrestling, the first Jesus joke that you wrote. And I think we were both at one point.
Now, this is one that I haven't checked out yet. I know it's like a Nicodemus short film or something. Megan, do you know what one that is? Could you send that to me? Because I think that's the only one I haven't seen yet. Sorry, I'm trying to fix this. All right, not wanting to move. Let's see if I do that. Sorry, I'm trying to fix this so that we can have... Whoop. So we can have chat up at the same time and not cover this. Sorry. Fixing. We'll do this. All right. I will get this, I promise. We'll put this up here so it's a little bit out of the way. There we go. A little bit better there. All right.
Hey, will this play? Like, how is this going to go?
Megan, you're supposed to be if I'm not the expert, you're definitely supposed to be the expert, bro.
Right.
If we give Jesus a sense of humor,
Right.
come back a couple months later and watch it on Good Friday with the audience,
A couple thousand people in the room.
people, and hear their response, and it was just like, wait, it landed, and they weren't offended by it.
And they weren't just laughing. There was this almost laughter of warmth,
Yeah.
of gratitude. Like there was something that we were seeing early on in this collaboration of portraying Jesus where people were saying, I haven't thought of that before, but
Yeah.
it makes perfect sense. And,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, this is,
It's like, oh, he's human.
Yeah,
There's the
exactly.
humanity
Yeah.
right there. Oh, we haven't seen that really.
is there something about his character, from the compassion to the strength, from the anger to the softness to the sadness, that comes easier for you than others? Because people talk often about your portrayal of the compassion. They love your eyes. They love every time Jesus shows compassion, that seems to work. How much of that is easier for you than other aspects of the character?
It's such an interesting thing. We talked about this with the other interview they did a few years ago, and how Jonathan Rumi has such a hard task, but he also has to just keep himself in check so much because playing the role of Jesus could be such a difficult thing, right? Man, there's just so much to it that makes it such a difficult thing. But Jonathan obviously does a great job. I think he's been doing an amazing job throughout all 3 seasons, and he'll continue to do so. And Dallas's direction and the way that they talk through everything, I think, is very smart. One of the things that I think is most powerful in the character is the humor. I think that's one of the things that whenever I first heard about the show from one of my pastors, they were like, yeah, it's such a funny show. Like, he's like joking around. And the two main things that he told me were like, this is actually a good show. Jesus is funny, et cetera, et cetera. And then he also said that Matthew is like on the spectrum. And those are like the 2 things that he found like interesting about the show, basically. And then we started to watch it, me and Vanessa. So yeah, it's interesting overall. But obviously they've done an amazing job portraying Jesus in a way that resonates with people, right? Because that's the danger, is how do you portray this character in a way that's not offensive and it's not belittling and it's not, there's so many things you have to watch out for. And so it's such a dangerous thing, that they've been able to navigate pretty well.
To me, it actually all feels kind of the same, as far as is one more difficult to access than the other. The moments that might give me the most pause are trying to access the divinity. I know what's going to happen to these guys. I know why I'm asking them to do this. They don't know why. How do I not telegraph
Right.
everything that I think I know as the actor that Jesus could have known in this moment, while still playing the humanity? How much should I let on that I know? What did Jesus know, and what didn't he know?
Right.
And what was left up, what was kept by the Father until it was time to impart that to his Son.
And I wonder too if Jonathan's idea of what Jesus would have known or how he would have acted is different than Dallas's. It has to be, right? Like, especially since their beliefs are so different. Jonathan being such a staunch Catholic and Dallas being not that, pretty far from that, actually. And so I wonder how different their ideas are when they discuss these kind of things, or if they've ever had arguments about certain things, or if it's just been kosher and it's all been good. I do wonder that myself. But
and to make that decision in a moment-to-moment, scene-by-scene basis in stuff that's outside of the gospel specifically becomes kind of very delicate, but something that I always approach through prayer.
We tend to take the approach that the macro stuff he knows. In episode 3 of this season, when he's talking to Mother Mary,
Yeah.
they both know getting the bridle means we're heading towards Jerusalem. We're not coming back to Nazareth. because we know what Jerusalem means. Now maybe the details, maybe not all known, maybe Mary didn't know. How much did Jesus know versus Mary? We portray that the macro stuff is known. So in that moment, when you're talking to the disciples, sending them out 2 by 2, and they start asking, we could die? And it's this interesting moment that really, I think, hit you hard in that moment, realizing, no, you're not, but not on this trip.
Not yet.
Yeah, right.
Give it a minute.
We could die. Yeah, oops, nope, no.
The bridal's interesting too. I don't necessarily agree that Mary would have known as much as the Chosen portrays that. I'm not sure that I don't know. It's definitely one of those things that's like, yes, it's a possibility. However, I don't think that's necessarily the case personally. And so that's one of the things we talked about going through season 3 is like, wait, is she upset because she knows or she understands? And then the Chosen, confirmed later on that yes, that they portray her as Mary knew. But yeah.
On this trip.
You definitely are going to have a great time on this trip.
Rabbi, what do you mean by this trip? No, never mind.
Let's talk later.
Going back to some of those early things we were doing, the vignettes and the short films, and then even season 1, when we first did the first 4 episodes, it felt a little bit like when we were doing the church short films. I mean,
well, as far as we knew, that's all we had were 4.
There was more money for that than there was for the church things, but not much more.
Right.
and
I can attest to that.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're seeing that value be incorporated into the show. Like every episode for season 3 of The Chosen was like $3 or $4 million, like $2 to $4 million basically for every episode of season 3. Now it's up to $6 million an episode, as far as we know. So it's a lot of money that's going into the show, but we are seeing the significant differences. Like if I showed you, the pilot episode for The Chosen and then showed you the differences in quality into the season finale of season 3, you're going to see a huge difference there. Again, another video we may do in the future comparing how they've improved and what kind of they've gone through doing that.
You're like, hey, I landed a show.
TV show.
It's independent. And, great, thanks,
The
Dallas.
church TV show.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Dallas. But last time we talked like this, reflecting on all this, was after episodes 1 through 4 had come out. We had filmed episodes 5 through 8, and you and I sat on a couch and just had a conversation then. And even then, it felt so undetermined. It still hadn't really broken out yet. We hadn't really, the time when it really started to break out was in 2020 during the pandemic.
That's right.
When you think from then to now, what would you say is the biggest strength and weakness of all that, of the difference? I mean, because I feel like you've probably changed a little bit. I think you've probably been sobered a little bit by some of it. I think both of us experienced this, hey, we always want what we do to work and to be successful and to be seen. I mean, and so we've gotten that. By all measures, over 100 million people have seen it. That's certainly a strength.
Sure.
There's probably been some confusing things about it as well. I mean, what has been this journey for you?
I think when we were filming season 1, all we could strictly speak to was the experience of the work itself. Now we have the impact of that work affecting people all over the world.
That's very true. Yeah, seeing like when you're doing the first season, like you're just worried about it working in general. You want this to be a good Christian show experience. You don't want it to be this cheesy, like you're trying not to make it fail. But now that it has such an impact, you're saying, okay, God, what exactly do you want us to do? And like, how can we do this to the best of our ability and continue this in the way that you want it to be done, right? Like there's such a different pressure now. I would say it's a similar pressure in the fact that you start out and you're like poor, you have no money, and you're starting out this show and you're super worried that it'll even get off the ground in the first place. But now the worry is, how do we do this most honorably? How do we do this most accurately? How do we do this in the best way possible, not just to continue the show being good, but to continue to raise that bar over and over and over again, and finding that next bar to go to, right? And I think the show has such an opportunity to evolve over the next few seasons and to really make a difference in the way that Christian content is formed, in the things that are talked about, in the way that it's shown overall. I'm really excited to see how dark season 4 goes, and that'll kind of give us a hint into seasons 5 and 6, and really see how far we're going to take this into the reality of the situation, which is a very dark story at certain points. So I'm excited to see that.
And their response to that. And then now this sort of implied responsibility towards continuing that in a sacred way, because now there's more pressure. It's like, well, you have a little bit of success, so does that success affect the direction of the show? Does having more money to make more future episodes affect the writing? Does it affect the actors behind them? Do egos start to flare up now because more people are watching it? And I would argue that fortunately, by the grace of God, for our show, we haven't seen that. We haven't seen the show, the writing going in a weird direction or feeling like it has to placate anybody,
right,
or satisfy anyone's needs or expectations or even requests or complaints.
Right.
You know, despite the many that come through, but comparative to the compliments, they're negligible, they're nominal, they're infinitesimal. And I think the same thing can be said for the people involved. I think because, again, by the grace of God, the kind of impact that this is having, the nature of the impact, it's more transforming the people that are involved in it internally than externally, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And I pray it continues to do that. And for me, it continues to deepen my faith, and I feel that God has sort of tapped me to do things that are now extending beyond the show, and to lend my voice in positions that I heretofore previously would never have even thought I would put my, hat in the arena for. But it's almost like my level of discernment has gotten greater in that things are a little more clear, and that I take great pains to try and hear God's voice throughout every step of this process, whether we're filming or in between seasons or any of these kinds of tangent projects I'm being involved with. It also makes me feel like what I do as a performer needs to have impact in some way. Mm-hmm. Unless I'm checking off, like, my nerd box as a kid, like, okay, there's a superhero film or something like.
Can you imagine Jonathan Ruby in a Marvel film? Oh, that'd be so epic, dude. I think it'd be cool to see him in a non-religious film. I haven't really seen him in anything else, obviously, and he hasn't had any of these major roles. I know that he's done other stuff, kind of on a smaller side, and he's done like voice acting and different things, but he really hasn't had a big role in something else. So I do wonder how this will affect him in the future. Is he going to be pigeonholed into this more religious route, or will he be able to kind of branch out and do other films in the future as well?
Of course I want to do that, because the kid in me would have died to do something like that. So aside from those kinds of exceptions, which I don't anticipate, but I never know, I'm not, it's anything can happen. Aside from that coming along, I feel like the stuff that I want to do now, as a result of this experience, as a result of seeing the power of an influence of media and the responsibility of media and the people in it, the things that I want to do are geared more towards impact. Yeah. How do you feel? I mean, do you feel that?
That's how I feel too. That's why we do this channel, because what I'm geared towards is impact. And so for me, I was a pastor for 10 years. I was a worship pastor for 10 years. And so for me, I did the math. And within 10 years of ministry, I reached 200, maybe 300,000 people at maximum, right? That's counting every Sunday, every Wednesday service, everything, right? Throughout my 10 years of service. And throughout my, 2 years, basically 2.5 years of actually doing YouTube, not even full time, right? We've been able to reach almost 4 million people. So the impact that we've had through this YouTube channel, I mean, right now, right, there's 150-ish people in this live stream, right? That's a pretty big church service. And so if I think about impact, that's what I want to do as well. That's what I'm really here for, is to have as much impact as I possibly can for the kingdom. And so doing this ministry, it's much different than traditional ministry. And yet God is using this for impact in a certain way, right? And I think he's called specific people to this ministry overall, which is why we're doing the new series that we're doing, talking about Christian creatives, like we did with Ruslan and like we're going to do with others in the future, because I truly believe that God has called certain people to be on this platform or other platforms to make a difference and to really do something different than what we've seen before in ministry. So impact, I think, is huge for sure.
But that's the same case with yourself as a director and a writer?
Yeah, now once I've gotten a taste of this, and my wife Amanda says the same thing. It's like now you almost feel like time is limited, and I'm not. There was a time in my career, and I know you felt the same way, where I was like, I'd love to be affirmed, I'd love to get an award, I'd love to hit the box office list, and now I only have time for things that have impact. But to your point earlier, when you talked about the increased pressure and the potential temptation to satisfy requests or to avoid criticism. I have, to this point, as I sit before you now trying to finish up season 4 and the scripts, I still feel like I'm in a good spot where when I'm in the blank page, I'm thinking about nothing other than, I gotta tell this story well. I gotta honor God. I gotta tell this story well. It's really hard to make a good show. It's really hard. And the blank page doesn't give a rip about how successful the previous season was, and it doesn't know about the criticism or the praise. The temptation is to want more of the, to get more of the YouTube videos that come out saying, this is the greatest show that's ever, and here's why, and we're going to review it about how impactful it was. And then
Paul Schrader said.
And then to avoid trying to get the YouTube videos that have a headline of, Dallas Jenkins is a heretic, or in your case, they'll say things
We've talked a lot about some of these channels.
about Jonathan Rumi and his evil beliefs and who he is and all this stuff. Do you find that when those come across your feed, if someone ever sends them to you, do they ever get into your head about how you're going to portray it, or are you still doing a fairly decent job of tuning it out? I can't believe the praise and I can't believe the hate. I just have to focus on the work.
Yeah, we've talked about this in the past too with Dallas specifically, because he said that he really struggled in the past with like this narcissism and this image of himself towards other people, and so he would allow these other things to kind of control how he acted in certain ways or how he was as a person. And so he's really had to, God's really dealt with that in his life over the last few years. And he's really come to a place now where he just doesn't care. The praise is the praise, it's whatever. And the criticism is the criticism. It doesn't matter to him anymore. So I hope that continues to be the case for sure.
Yeah.
And not be motivated by either of those things.
I think, especially in the beginning, when somebody has anything to say about you, you're like, oh, somebody's saying something. The fact that somebody's saying something is great.
Right.
And then you're like, oh, maybe it's not so great, One of the things I did recently was I used to have a Google alert on my name. So just to know, in real time, if there was something that came up, be like, oh, cool, what's this? Yeah. I took that off.
Yeah, that's wise. Yeah.
Yeah. So had you had that, or had you removed one for yourself? Or?
Yeah, I didn't have it personally. Early on, I learned not to do that. Also, plus I'm technologically moronic, and so I'm not sure I even knew how to do it. But I had people who would do it for me, and we have a publicist every now and then. They'd give a report, and I've just said, don't do that anymore. Yeah. Because it's hard enough when you just log into Instagram or Facebook or YouTube. Because of our connection to The Chosen, and because we watch Chosen videos, that's feeding you stuff. Yeah. So I'll log on to YouTube, and the first video up is some headline quoting me saying something I didn't know I'd ever said. Yeah. I'm really working hard, especially in this year, to try to fast from that a little bit more and try not to be motivated by it at all, because I used to part of it is our show. We live and die in many ways by our relationship with our fans and with the viewers and connecting with them. So I don't want to totally lose that. I want to have my finger on the pulse of our viewers and have that relationship and have that personal. I don't want to get to the point for either of us where the show becomes to a place where we don't want to interact because we're too busy or
the show's a little bit different than other shows because someone else, like, you don't hear about Steven Spielberg, chatting with his fans and hanging out with them because, well, he's Steven Spielberg, right? Like, he doesn't need, like, personally their money to succeed. He just needs them to come out to the theaters and watch his movies or whatever, right? But Dallas, this show, in order to get made in the first place, needs people. It needs a lot of people. It needs a lot of money. And so, of course, he's got to keep his hand on the pulse and really understand the community, because if he doesn't, then things get out of hand really fast and he's not able to communicate in the way that he wants to communicate, and he's not able to explain things when things do go awry, like with the controversies that we've had during season 3, right? So there's things that he's been able to just quickly explain and tell you guys exactly what it's like, and then that helps him to, quell these fires that are kind of going on.
Or too big, anything like that. So I don't think that's going to happen, but
No.
it can be. It can
But
be
you might want to
distracting.
not interact because it's just overwhelming. The overwhelming amount of information, opinions. I mean, we're people, we're human beings that are sort of by virtue of what we do for a living, are assaulted by the sheer number of opinions and comments that are just thrown our way, whether we want them or not.
Sure.
And so it's gonna affect us in some way. If I find myself disengaging, it's not because I don't want to connect with fans.
Yeah.
I love fans. I love the people that support our show. I love what we do. I love doing what we do for a living. It'll only happen at that point because it's gotten to a level where it's just completely overwhelming.
Yeah.
But I think taking that.
I think Vanessa and me are in the background of that shot. I can't go frame by frame on here.
That support our show.
see if I can
I love
stop
what
it.
we do. I love doing what we do for a living. It'll only happen at that point because it's gotten to a
I'm trying to see where we are. I think we're like,
level where
right in the back, like near that line on the side over there.
it's just completely overwhelming.
Yeah.
But I think taking that step and removing the possibilities of an increase of those things actually getting through to your inbox is a great first step that I probably should have done about 6 months ago. But
I think there's a level to it, right? So like for our YouTube channel, we're at the point now where I can read a lot of the comments. Not every comment I get to read because they just come in sometimes too fast or in a bunch at a time. But we're still at the level where I can read most comments. I can chat with you guys. I can really know everybody that's in here. Like most people that are in the chat tonight, I've seen you before. We've talked before, right? We've got our people that are always here and part of our core community. When you're at the level that The Chosen is, when you have millions of people watching or hundreds of thousands of people on a live stream, it's almost impossible. And so there comes a point when there's just too much input, right? There comes a point where there is just so much volume of comments and commentary and YouTube videos and different things that are about you or towards you that you can't really keep up. And so I totally get this understanding for sure. There's going to be a point eventually in our YouTube career when I can't read every single comment and when I can't reply to all these things that people are asking me. And, some of that's happening now as we grow, but, as we get further and further, it's going to be more and more difficult. So
I'm like, it took this most recent event to be like, I don't think I need to know everything that's going on. If I'm curious, like if an article comes out, somebody will send it to me if it's actually important. If I want to know, I can always just Google it myself. That's a good thing to have removed any and all traces.
I've removed my name.
You have.
But I still have Jonathan Rumi, Catholic Heretic, in my Google alerts, so that I know when they're talking about you. But I don't think you should do it. I just think it's good for me to do.
That is going to be an article in and of itself. Like, it's true. He's a heretic. We knew it.
Yeah. No, it's already been done. I made a quote for it.
Oh, good. Good.
But
You wrote the article.
yeah, just to get heat off me, I had to start. I had to start seeding information about Jonathan's religious deviancy.
Yeah.
So anyway, one thing that I think we did in season 3 is ensure, and you and I remind each other of this sometimes, is to keep the set a sacred place where none of that comes into play.
Yeah.
That when we start the day, this is not a show that has now 100 million viewers as opposed to season 1 when it had however many, or when we were doing a little thing for the church.
Yeah.
It has to be the same. It has to be all we can focus on is the work. Typically on set, you're trying to tune out the fans, you're trying to tune out the pressure, you're trying to tune out the eyeballs and just think about the work. Well, then we literally brought the fans
5,000 fans.
5,000 of our most passionate.
Yeah, it was actually closer to 12,000 because each day they had 5,000, and then on the last day they had about 2,000 fans that came in over those 3 days. So there's a lot of people total, not just 5,000 people, but a lot more.
Loyal fans. Now, the strength of that to me was, I think, it made the scene where you're preaching and where you're feeding and all of that stuff became actually really organic and, and fun, but it also, at times, it made it a little difficult, I imagine, because when you're just walking from your mark to the trailer or to get a drink, they're all just staring and the phones are out and all that stuff.
Yeah.
We don't want to do anything about that. These are the people who make our show happen, but it can't be easy. And so what were the strengths and weaknesses of that whole sequence of a few days of 10,000 people showing up?
It's one thing when it's 10,000 actors, and it's another thing when it's 10,000 fans.
Yep, very different.
Especially, I think, for me and the amount of dialogue I had, especially on those days.
Yep.
I'm so, like, ADHD, like, I can't focus if I'm just chatting with people and just, like, hanging out. Like, I have to separate myself because there's, number one, there's so many lines, and number two, there's all the stuff internally that has to kind of come out on screen. And so there's a little bit of like you're being fed by the fact that there's a live crowd and there's actually 5,000 people and you're like, oh my gosh, this is what it would have looked like. And when there was that sort of pullback and we see the disciples feeding everybody, like I looked at it and all of a sudden I got hit with a huge blast of emotion because I'm like, this is what it would have looked like.
Yeah, I actually had a discussion with Ryan and Tyler, the writers of the show, like just standing out there in the field and you know, looking at everything. I was just sitting there with them, and you know, Ryan's just like, man, like this is it. Like this is what it actually would have been, you know? And just having that moment was actually surreal. Very, very, very cool.
And it struck me deeply. And then there's the times, like you indicated, in between where somebody just walks up to you and they're like, hi, and then like literally stick a phone in your face and snap a photo and you're like, what? And then they just walk away and they're like, you know, they're on cloud 9 and you're like, what just happened? And luckily, like everybody, you know, the crew did as the best they could to try to minimize that, but with so many people, it's not possible. So I think it's a double-edged sword at times, but I think we handled it pretty well. Yeah. And based on what I saw in the finale in 307 and 308, it just worked.
Yeah, so tell me about that. So you just last night, you got a chance to see 7 and 8.
Yeah.
And you texted me briefly, but I wanted also to just talk about it now without going too much into it. These
you don't want me to spoil
it. These were, I think, without a close second, between the feeding of the 5,000 scene and the walking on water scene, the two most difficult, logistically challenging things we've done for different reasons. The feeding of the 5,000, where it was so hot, and there were so many people, and you had the distractions, like you just said. But there were some strengths to that as well. But it was painful over the course of several days in that heat, and you uniquely, because you had pages of dialogue to recite. So that was painful and difficult and challenging, and took place over the course of 2 weeks, because we also had those scenes where you're talking to those different groups of people, the Syrophoenicians and the Nabateans and all that. That was in some ways harder than the feeding of the 5,000 stuff, because it was so hot and there was so much to do and say and all that. So that was logistically challenging. We had 4 cameras going. This was big. We had limited time. Well, then there's the walking on water scene, which doesn't have any of those things. No distractions. There was no heat. The environment was...
Yeah, this is so insane. The fact that they pulled this off the way that they did, is just crazy, man. It's just really, really crazy.
Relatively controlled, but we're in a tank. And so none of the things you're saying are actually going to be used later because the audio isn't worth it. You're hearing this chunk, chunk, chunk the whole time to get the waves to move, and you're standing in a blue, like 3-walled blue set. Nothing about it on the surface feels organic. How did you make it as organic as possible? There's divers in the water, there's cameras, blue screens, but it's ultimately you.
Imagine being that lifeguard. Man, that would be a rough job right there. Being the lifeguard on the set of The Chosen would be a rough one right there. Just like bobbing for hours, just waiting for these actors to go through what they're gonna do. That's so funny.
You and Shahar having the most intense moment in the show, and then with all the 5,000 people. How do you find that focus?
I think for me, it's just focusing on who's in front of me. You know, and with somebody like Shahar, who's, you know, just as committed to, you know, and just in the pocket and locked in as I try to be, and everybody, you know, our whole cast, everybody knows what we're trying to accomplish and the level of concentration that it takes, especially when you have all this stuff that is trying to pull you out of the scene, trying to pull your concentration. And I think that's what it is. It's sort of going tunnel vision and just focusing on exactly what's in front of you and what's at hand and what are the emotional stakes and focusing on the moment. Then everything else starts to fade away. You don't think about it. And then when the technology or the crane or he was attached to the ropes and they had to drop him, and in that particular scene he had a lot more to kind of manage than I had to. I just had to try to stay afloat, which wasn't always easy at times, especially when everything was full tilt. I think
I want to see the bloopers of them just falling in the water over and over again. I'm sure that happened a lot.
As long as you stay focused on what it is you're there to do and to say, that's kind of what gets us through the scene.
So when you saw it,
when I saw it,
what did you think?
I was just, I was blown away. It's still hard to find words to kind of to describe seeing that and knowing where it was and where it got to with all the elements. Not just visual effects, but the music and the way you cut it and the little cutaways and the moments and the reactions and the sound effects and then the intercutting with Eden. It worked on a level that I don't think anybody's ever seen before.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it on this channel, talking about those other walking on water scenes. We did it on a live stream a little while ago. I can't put it on YouTube because copyright claim stuff on that video specifically, but there's no other walking on water scene that even comes close to this walking on water scene. We looked at the Bible series, also known as Son of Man. We looked at a bunch of other variations of this walking on water scene from different productions. 3 or 4 of them we looked at. None of them are even remotely close to this one. This one was by far the best done walking on water scene that has ever been produced. Insanely impressive, for sure.
And so I'm just so very proud of it and proud to be a part of it. It's a stunning achievement, and I think you should be really, really proud of yourself and excited about how it's going to affect people, because people are going to lose their marbles stuff.
Well, and that's the key is, and that's one of the reasons why, I mean, you and I talked about this a couple of years ago about the walking water. I said, I'm not doing it.
And I was like, how are you not going to do that one? Yeah. You're like, it's going to be cheesy. There's just no way. I mean,
and I didn't
the
know
only way I could actually do it. And then you sort of left the door open for yourself. I'm like, so you're saying there's a chance.
Right.
Is if I can find an emotional anchor in the thing. I'm like, and I remember saying to you, we were in a booth in Nashville.
Yeah.
And saying like, if anybody can find an emotional anchor into that miracle, you can. And you did. And God bless you, man, because it's awesome.
Well, the visual effects turned out great. They're better than I would have imagined. I was scared of it, but I put my trust in this group, this team led by Chris June and Will Nicholson, and this company, these guys, Andrew and Juan from Australia, who put it together. It was just
unreal.
beautiful.
I heard about the plates that they shot in Australia.
Yeah. So what they did was,
and I was like, how did they do that?
Yes.
It didn't look like, it wasn't computer generated. It was a real.
Yeah, so the water was real.
Yeah, they did some really impressive stuff in this shot. I would love to see, I don't know if you guys know Corridor Digital at all, but they have a series on their second channel called VFX Artists React. I'd love to see them just talk about this scene and to talk about how it was done, because like I said, it's the best walking on water scene. I doubt they would do it because it's a Christian show, but I would love to see that for sure. The visual effects have gotten so much better. That's one of the major things that has improved even since season 2. There were some moments in season 2 where I literally laughed out loud because some of the graphics were just kind of iffy for me, right? We talked about the crippled hand. It wasn't as good as I think it could have been. But again, there's budget, there's time frames, there's a lot of different things that could have hindered that. And so season 3's, I was very impressed with many of the things that people just don't realize are visual effects, such as like just the backgrounds of certain areas or the backgrounds of this walking on water scene are all replaced, just completely replaced. This is not an easy thing that's just like, oh, it's done. Like, like this is a hard thing to make sure that it looks good and looks right to the eye. And they've done an amazing job for sure.
Well, and typically you'd film in the blue tank like we did, and then you'd get, when you use the word plates, it's referring to we film stuff that will be used to put behind the foreground eventually.
Yeah, you just set up a camera with no people of the thing that you want to have as the background for the actors.
So we were going to film the water in the tank.
Yeah.
Because that's the same water. That's obviously going to blend better with the water that we're filming in. And we ran out of light. We couldn't get it. And so we were nervous about that. And then these guys went out in Australia, went out into the waves and grabbed cameras and stood there and captured these waves and captured the...
Brenda, you might be right. I'm not sure. But they did redo it after I made a pretty big comment on our channel. So, hey, maybe I had some sort of influence. I don't know. I'm sure I was not the only one that talked about it, but maybe.
The close-ups, I mean, all that water is real, and then they blended it in. I couldn't believe it. I remember the first time I saw the scene, in the first time that it started to look good, because initially it's looking awful because they're just trying things and they're showing you, do you like the direction we're going here? And I'm like, that'll look better at some point, right? And they're like,
yeah, he has to trust this team so much. Like for him to release his control of the project, this is something that obviously his name is all over, right? Dallas Jenkins, The Chosen, like this is a big deal for him. For him to release this big of a scene to a company that, you know, could ruin it, like, I don't know, man. That's pretty rough. Like that would take a lot of trust. It would take a lot of humility to be able to do that for me. While I would trust, you know, that VFX artists are good at what they do, like there's been so many shots and so many different things, even in big Marvel blockbuster movies, that have looked terrible over the years. And so if they do this wrong, like this is going to have such a mar on The Chosen. It would have such a mar on specifically the season 3 finale, right? Like it would be such a big deal. So yeah. Yeah, Joanna, they redid that scene. I actually have a video that shows the old version and the new version. It does look a little bit better, but I think with a $6 million budget, they do that scene totally different. So also the hand in that video is the wrong hand in that episode. It's actually his right hand. The Bible specifically says his right hand, but in the show it's his left hand, or the other way around, one of those two. but the show actually gets it wrong there too, which is really interesting. One of the little moments where the accuracy was a little bit off.
Of course. So finally, I remember the first time when I saw it, where it actually started to look good, and that first shot of Jesus silhouetted.
So good.
I was like barely breathing.
You pooped yourself, didn't you?
Yeah, little bit. Yeah.
Just a smidge.
We won't be seeing those underwear again, but may they rest in peace. But none of that matters if it's just spectacle and there is no story. I mean, and I remember someone who saw the scene a couple days ago said, "Oh, you chosened it," and what he meant was, it's ultimately still Simon and Jesus, and whether they were standing on water, which makes it huge and extraordinary and beautiful, or whether they were standing on a path.
Yeah.
What they're talking about matters.
Yeah.
It's not just, it's really raining, I'm really stormy, and I hope I don't fall in. That when he's looking at you and saying, I've been right here in front of you, believing in you, and you're out here breaking up fights in the Decapolis, turning that into something that actually meant something.
Having that emotional connection into the scene is huge. Kathy says, wouldn't it be great if the Chosen could team up with Weta for CGI bits? Okay. Here's my pitch. Okay, here's my pitch. I'll direct this to Dallas Jenkins. All right, Weta and Dallas Jenkins need to get together. Imagine this. Imagine a cinematic rendition of the Book of Revelation with Weta Digital doing the graphic design and the costume design for all the stuff and the character design for all the stuff. But then Weta Digital, for those that don't know, is the company that did like Lord of the Rings, like all that stuff. Very, very, very huge, massive company. I believe they worked on Avatar as well. So Avatar Way of Water and the first Avatar. Amazing company. But imagine a cinematic rendition of the Book of Revelation, or at least a piece of it, with Weta doing all of that stuff, and then Dallas Jenkins, Ryan, and Tyler writing it behind the scenes. How amazing would that be? That would be so amazing. I would pay a lot of money for that, for sure.
Hope is that the audience, when they watched it, after about 20 seconds, stopped thinking so much about how we did it and just were lost in it.
Yeah. I was there when we did it. So I think people that aren't in the business and know how the sausage is made and know where the seams could be, I don't know how they couldn't be just immersed in it.
At the end of the day, I do want you to like it. I do, because I want you guys to trust the process, and then, but also for me to trust, because a couple of these scenes are way bigger than I'm capable of, and I know nothing about visual effects. I couldn't do any of this stuff. So it's a good, healthy place for me to be in too, to go, Ryan and Tyler and I think we got the ball to the 20-yard line with the writing of it, and I feel good about that. And
no, the ball goes to the 80-yard line with the writing. The writing, to me, is literally 80%, if not more, of this show. The show could look worse, but as long as it had as good a writing as it has, then it's well worth it, for sure. But I'm glad that it looks as good as it does as well.
I feel like we got the performances, and but ultimately there's things about this that are way bigger than me, things that I'm not capable of, and it's a good place to be. It's a good reminder that this is bigger than I'm capable of, and that keeps us easily humble.
Next stop, Transfiguration. Yes, you heard it.
Yes, come on, let's go. I severely doubt they'll do the Transfiguration, but I would love it.
Here first. All right.
That's the other one you asked me about, and I said no, and I'm sticking to that one. I know you'd love to have a big beam of light coming out of your eyes.
I'm not even saying that. We just keep praying. Keep praying. Just keep it. Keep praying.
Don't get your hopes up.
Keep praying.
Jonathan's on our side, everybody.
Get your hopes up.
You never know.
Season 3 in general, when you first got the scripts, I remember you didn't, because you were doing another project, Jesus Revolution, in theaters. Because you were doing another project during pre-production for The Chosen, you didn't read all the scripts right away. And I remember when I first saw you, you were like, you had read the first few, and you were getting ready for episode 3, which we had a lot to do for that. And you're like, yeah, it's good so far. And I'm like, have you read the second half yet? And you're like, not yet. And I'm like, Let me know how that goes, because you got a few more lines and a few more line paragraphs.
I'm like, no.
Right. So how much of that is intimidating versus exciting?
It only gets intimidating when time is on the line. But even then, I'm a kind of person that tends to work well under deadlines and get the most productive under deadlines. I'm trying to sort of shift out of that and give myself a little more breathing room, but I think that's going to be a process. Yeah, I mean, it can be intimidating. I mean, there were times where, I was dealing with some stuff personally that affected my ability to even just absorb material. Right. I couldn't do it. And so I had to figure out other ways of being able to do my job well. And
I do wonder what different techniques all of the actors use, right? Because I know that some people will like show up to set and they'll like memorize their lines on the spot and then they'll do it from there. Some of them have all the lines memorized ahead of time and they're all good. Some of them kind of struggle through some of the lines as they go through and it takes them a little bit longer, whatever. I do wonder what the different techniques are that they all use, to memorize lines, especially when you have such a long, grouping of lines or different dialogue scenes that are going on. I did a lot of acting when I was in high school and a little bit in college and stuff. And so like, I remember doing that, but it was always just like keep on running it over and 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 over until I got it. Right. So I do wonder if there's any techniques that are different than what I know.
And by the grace of God, I think, I pulled it off and without anyone else really knowing of what I might have been dealing with or what I had to do as an alternative. But it definitely, so those are the kinds of moments where it gets a little intimidating because, life is out of our control for the most part, right? So you never know. And at the end of the day, I just have to, as always, has been sort of our shared mantra along similar timelines, surrender becomes the name of the game. Like, how do I just let go of my expectations of what I thought this was going to be, how this was going to unfold, or what it was going to look like, and how do I just trust that God's going to cover me 100% all the way through, no matter what. And He did. And so
and that comes out sometimes in scenes where sometimes you expect it to be emotional and it isn't. Other times, suddenly, I've seen you where it wasn't written this way, you weren't planning it this way, and suddenly you were kind of overcome, and the scene was better for it, and we didn't plan for it. There's been multiple times where the end result was not what we expected, and yet better than what we expected. And sometimes you'll be like, I'm trying to access this emotion for the scene. It's not quite there. And sometimes you're like, you know what? Maybe it's not supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have talked about that. Like it's almost like I felt like there's been God's kind of been like, no, not for this scene. I'm like, but come on, it's just right there on the page. No, just let this be as is. And then all of a sudden it's like I can't access the thing that usually it's not an issue for me to access, like an emotion. I'm like, but why? And then when I see it, I'm like, oh yeah, it is better without that. It would have been too much.
Yeah, we felt that in the scene with the bleeding woman, Veronica, episode 5, where I think you kept trying to kind of access something and you were having a hard time with it. And I think, you know what? She's bringing all of that. Maybe it's okay for you to be the comforter here as opposed to sharing in the same emotions.
Yeah, sharing in that pain. Because I think that's something that for me, it's, the approach, part of the approach to the character of Jesus has been he experiences emotions on an exponential level to the rest of humanity because of who he is. And so where does that come out and how does it come out? And then how is it tempered? Coupled with the foreknowledge of events and things like that. So it becomes a very tricky dance sometimes to do, but again, at the end of the day, I try to continue to learn the lesson of surrender and be like, okay, if it's not working, don't push it, don't, And then if there is something where I'm like, I think I need to fight for this, and I think this choice would work, and then it happens, then you're like, okay, I think that it actually was better than I originally had planned, and this just kind of came in the moment. So
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that sets this show apart, right? Like, obviously there's other Christian productions, there's other Christian teams that work on certain things and they go through things, but in this environment, we've heard so many times from the actors, from non-Christian actors that are part of this production, like, we've seen so many times that this is a different environment than normal Hollywood productions, to where everybody is just, it's a different type of family, where it's more tight-knit, and there's these different things that are kind of happening, at least in the core of it, right? And so, like, even with the extras that we got to talk to or befriend when we were on set for the Feeding the 5,000 and some other things, like, we got to see how they interacted with people and how they were really a part of the set and how they had been there since season 1 and they were really part of the family as well. Not just these big actors, not just Dallas and the assistant directors and all that kind of stuff, but like, really everybody's a piece of this family, and seeing that is so cool from the outside looking in. And I think this is a huge thing that God uses, not only the environment on set, but also how they interact with different things, how they write the show in the first place. A lot of these different things are all directed directly by God, and so it works out to be a different type of system than other Hollywood productions or other things kind of going on. So really cool to see that, for sure.
What was your favorite scene to film, and then what was, when you've watched now the full season, what's your favorite scene?
There was a lot. I mean, there was so much, but if I had to pick, because it's fresh in my mind, I think the dialogue between John and Simon, how that relationship kind of evolves, their back and forth is just so beautiful, and just, it was riveting to watch. I sent George a text earlier today, actually, like, brother, I saw the 2 episodes last night in preparation for this interview today, and I just told him, I said, your work was awesome. I mean, everybody just, like, knocked it out of the park this season. They do every season, but then you're like, okay, I know what to expect. Right. And then you see stuff and you're like, I did not expect that. Some of the stuff between Liz
and Amber.
And Amber was great. Stuff with Liz and Paris, with Mary Magdalene and Matthew, about the tassels. And then he's telling the story about how he got them. I was just like, so good.
Yeah. Is there a scene you look back on filming of season? I mean, season 3 was tough, and we've made no bones about that. It was just, it was
the toughest season of our life.
Oh yeah, no, it just wasn't. It wasn't fun. COVID and delays and schedule problems and weather and losing days to weather. Weather clears up and you're.
Yeah, that was a crazy time for sure. All the rain and then the heat and everything else that came through. Let me get some of these comments real fast. I'm eager to see what happened when Jesus invited Shmuel to join him for prayer and the talk that came afterwards. Me too. It's one of the big things that I've been thinking about as we kind of go through and think about what's going to happen for the next season. Let me make this a little bit smaller so it doesn't cover my face as much. And we'll put it up here. No, put it right here. Perfect. Yeah, definitely interested in this as well. We'll see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't. But we do know, at least we think, that Shmuel is going to have a dinner with Jesus, and that's when the woman's going to come and anoint his feet, most likely Mary, the sister of Lazarus, and all that's going to happen. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it all happens, but I'm excited about that for sure. Are all 3 writers evangelical? I'm like 99.99999% sure. I think so, yes. But who knows? Well, actually, I know. I'm pretty sure they all are. Yeah.
Boiling in the sun. It wasn't an easy season. I felt bad about it, as the boss, but I also was like, I can't do it. I have nothing to do about this. I want us to have a good experience.
Yeah.
But are there any that you watch and you go, that was fun? I actually enjoyed the process of filming that.
I think the thing that I love is the third episode, the bottle episodes, where we get to explore Jesus' life in ways that we haven't seen before. Not because it focuses on Jesus, but because it focuses on things about Jesus that that's novel. We've never seen that. And get to do things like playing the trigon, like just having a blast with Lazarus.
Because you and Demetrius and I worked together years before on some of those short films and vignettes. And got to know him, and then so it became so easy for him to play your friend.
When I found out when I saw the Christmas special, and I found out Demetrius was playing Lazarus, I was overjoyed. Like half the job is done because we're actually friends.
Right.
So.
And that scene, was a lot of fun. And we have a little blooper reel that is at the end credits of episode 8, and we put in that spot where you guys were playing, and all of a sudden he just tossed the ball at you and you weren't even paying attention because you didn't know we were rolling yet, and they just started going on like, oh, Jesus lost, and you're like, what? Come on! And you guys had this organic moment. Just didn't fully work for the scene, but we did get it in the blooper reel.
Oh, cool.
But working with Demetrius,
he's amazing.
He's fun.
Yeah, he's awesome. I love Lazarus, the way that he's been acting, the way that he's been using the character. Really, really good.
Fun and fast, and
he's so quick. Yeah. Like he's right there with you every step of the way. Yeah. Like, I mean, and he's a great theater actor, and so shooting different scenes for 3 was really, really cool, and getting kicked out of the temple and brought to the edge of the cliff, and that was a scene. That was a passage in scripture.
Yeah, so like, for example, we were talking about CGI and how they're using computer graphics. Like, did you guys notice that behind Jesus here was all, CGI during this scene? Because all of that is blue screen, which they're going to take out in post and put something else there, right? So all of that is changed, basically. So did you even realize that when you're watching the show? That's some of the stuff that I'm talking about there.
That I always wondered how that happened. What actually happened? What could that have looked like? Did he like, was it almost like post-resurrection walking through walls, Jesus, that he just disappeared into the crowd? They're like, where'd he go? Or was it just like everybody was kind of like frozen, like sort of how we portrayed it? And so getting to actually realize those scenes literally was to me, just personally, a whole lot of fun.
One thing I want to touch on too, when you brought up episode 3, is the unique relationship you have with Vanessa as Mother Mary, because I've seen that whether it's a scene you have with her or a scene where she's off camera and doesn't even have lines, she tends to be sometimes as much or more than I am your go-to to get into the moment. I mean, sometimes you go to me, sometimes we're talking about it, but sometimes having her there, it's almost like a sense memory that seeing her or talking to her gets you into that space that you need to be into.
I can just step into the relationship of son to mother. We work very similarly, and it's just kind of this unspoken thing. We never talked about like, or planned like, this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna come to you when I need to, you're gonna come to me. It was just like, and now we're holding hands. And it was just, it's effortless. It's like as if in that moment, she is my mother. Even though I'm older than her. Yeah,
I think about this all the time. Jonathan Rumi is almost 50 years old. Like, he does not look anywhere near that old, but he is almost 50 years old. Really interesting.
Crazy. Again, I think it's one of those things that's a gift because of who she is to us as Christians theologically, and like what she represents to him and he to her. The wife of God, the daughter of God, the mother of God. She's all these things. And then when we connect in these scenes, it's like, yeah, but that's my mom too.
Right.
That's my mom. I don't know, I can't really, it almost feels sacrilegious to try to figure out what it is that makes that happen. It just happens. If I know she's in the next room and I have to like, bring that into the scene, I might just go and like hold her hand for a second and I'm gone. That's it.
Well, I remember in that scene in the synagogue when Jesus is struggling with his friends and family and people he grew up with, imploring them to hear the truth. That was a tough day. It was a long day of filming. You had a ton to memorize. You were going through a lot in your life. It seemed like every now and then you just look to her and in character start to just talk to her. They're not getting it, and that would just, and we'd be like, all right, roll, because it seemed to be that thing that got you into that space.
It's a really special thing when you can live in the circumstances of the scene and in the skin of the character with
Again, this is more difficult than a normal character, right? Because a normal character you can kind of relate to more, but having to come up with these emotions that Jesus would have is so difficult, right? It's such a difficult thing because you can't, like, it's impossible. It's impossible for us to understand fully what Jesus felt or how he thought and all of those things. So like when he's playing Lonnie Frisbee in the Jesus Revolution, it's a completely different understanding because he can go back and he can watch footage of Lonnie Frisbee. He can really take on that character. And even one of Lonnie Frisbee's best friends said that he did an amazing job and that he acted just like Lonnie did. And so there's a huge, massive difference here in the way that you go about getting into this character and understanding the character. Yeah, it's interesting for sure.
your scene partner, with your fellow actor. And then they respond in kind, and it's like the reality is not broken. It's there, and there just happens to be people around with cameras capturing it. But they're there and they're not interfering with this moment in time that for us is actually existing. Ideally, if I could work in that place all the time with everyone, it would be a different, I don't know what it would be like. But that's not possible. It's not realistic for me to expect. So when I do have that with certain people, she being one of them, Liz being another, because of the beginning of the show, there is that kind of thing, and the interaction, the physical interaction we've had. Most of the interactions with the characters is like, there isn't a whole lot of physical interaction unless it's like the double slap on the back with one of the disciple brothers. But there's a physical intimacy with Mother Mary, and then with Jesus and Mary, he's like he might be one of the only of the inner circle, one of the only people that we've seen him hug physically, as a woman, because he just didn't do that. Jewish men and women, they didn't physically interact unless they were husband and wife, and even then not in public, right? With Mother Mary, I think that might have something to do with it, because we can have this physical intimacy and closeness that it just allows you this extra level of emotional accessibility that you don't necessarily get to have with everybody.
Right. This has been a journey that started small, and I kind of, part of me wants to make sure it stays small, that ultimately when we're on set, we're doing this, that we never lose that, as well as our brotherhood that has been forged over getting the privilege of portraying most impactful and life-changing man in history. I mean, isn't that the greatest privilege that of all of this, no matter how difficult it is, no matter how bizarre it sometimes feels, is it not a privilege of a lifetime that we get to take these moments that we actually believe happened in history and that have been read by billions of people, and we get a chance to kind of bring them to life in a new way, but ultimately honoring the truth of what happened. I mean, it's
100%.
Every now and then, I think you and I'll pull each other aside and just be like, we get to bring this back. For
I wonder if we'll really ever realize what we got to do until afterwards. Because I feel like, in my mind, logically, I understand how special this is, but I feel like I'm still in the middle of it, and it's kind of hard to completely step back. Do you feel that?
Oh, totally. Yeah. People always say, "Are you enjoying it? Isn't this exciting?" And I'm like,
ask me when it's over.
Yeah. I like having done it. I'm not sure I like doing it all the time. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's always sitting right over. I mean, as I'm talking to you right now, I've got script. I mean, just before we started talking, you were like, "So when can I see the scripts for season 4?" And I'm like, "You just watched the episodes yesterday.
We're 2 months out, Dallas. I got to start prepping.
Give it a minute, So
I'll start working out again."
Yeah, exactly. It's hard. It's hard to enjoy it as much as I should, but every now and then I think you and I pull each other aside and go, "Look what we get to do. Look, we get to recreate."
We should be better about that when we're filming. Just to be like, let's just stop for a second and take a look at what's going on right now. Like even this. Like at some point in the future, 10 years from now, we're gonna be like, there was this time where we were doing this thing, and we got to talk about it, and like people had never seen anything like this, and who knows where we're gonna be at that point. what it's going to be like. If we'll even be able to who knows what it's going to be like. So even just sitting here getting to talk about this thing that we're still technically less than halfway through.
Yeah.
We're less than halfway through it. And in 5 months, 6 months from now, we will be more than halfway through it. Whoa, where did that time go?
Yeah.
Yep. Starting next week, by the way. If you're not subscribed, definitely subscribe to the channel. We're going to be talking about all the behind the scenes for season 4, which they're starting to shoot in a little over a week. So just a week and a day. I think the 27th is when they're supposed to start, maybe. Either tomorrow or the 27th. I can't remember. Might be tomorrow. I got to look at my notes. I don't remember. But soon, in a week or two. Or in a day or a week. One of the two.
So I think I'm going to try to remember that as we start shooting 4. Just to be like, let's just stop for a second. Especially if it's like, it's long and it's rough and it's tiring and like we're annoyed or we're this or the weather. And like, let's take a breath and just look at where we are and what we're doing. And how blessed we are to tell this story.
We don't do it enough.
No.
That's a good note.
But that's life, isn't it?
Yeah.
We'll do it more.
Yeah.
Less
Awesome.
time on YouTube.
Awesome. That is that. Really cool video. I think overall it's so cool to get a chance to just like step back and look back. I know when I do that for my channel, it's crazy to see how far we've come and to see, we're not even living in the same state anymore. We've got a new studio and all the different stuff that's kind of going into that. Man, it's been a crazy ride. So when I think about that, I'm whether I like it or not, I'm connected to The Chosen in some way. Our channel really started off getting traction because of The Chosen. And so now I'm able to make some of these other videos and do some other things. But, The Chosen is really still the majority of our content. It's still the majority of our focus for what we're doing right now because it's the most bestest Christian content, in the land. And so that's really where our focus is right now, is talking about the best Christian content. And right now there's not too much of it. Like we get some of these movies and stuff, but I'm really excited to see more shows. I would love to see more stuff in the future. We're going to be talking about a lot of other YouTube channels and stuff like that. I would love to see like video games. I would love to see a lot of different things in the future that could really be great Christian content. Right now we don't get a lot of it. That's why The Chosen is such an anomaly. And we're seeing some of these other media projects come out that are actually really good, like Jesus Revolution, and some of these other things that I'm kind of keeping my eye on. I'm really hoping that things like The Shift or Testament, or His Only Son, a lot of these other things, I'm really hoping that they're done really, really well. Like that the writing is impeccable, that the cinematography is amazing, and that these things aren't just settled for. I'm really, really praying that these things can go to the next level and the next level and the next level, and that The Chosen includes that. Like, I just don't want to see any more bad Christian content. And on our channel, if you've been around for a while, you know me, and you know very well that I don't settle for mediocre Christian content. If it's mediocre, then it's not good enough. It needs to be high quality. It needs to have energy and effort put into it. It needs to stand up to the bar that the world has set. If it doesn't even reach that, then it's not worth it for me. It needs to be really good. And I think that we've failed so much on that in the past. And so I'm really excited to see more and more of this Christian content moving forward and talking about that for sure. But